Could you start with your name and your job title, please?
My name is Mitchell Johnson, and job title is I'm in the media. Keep it very broad.
Yeah, very, very broad. I love it. I want to start with something that I don't think you'll remember, but it was a really interesting moment for me. And now I know a lot more about you, having listened to the first, 4 or 5 episodes of your podcast. Uh, I, I've been dying to ask you about this. The 2010-11 Ashes at the Wacker when you went through England, right? Afterwards, there was a press conference, and you and Ricky had to go up after the game together. And for 20 minutes, they asked Ricky questions, and you just sat there not being asked any questions. There's a microphone on the desk that kept falling down, and you spent the whole podcast trying to fix this microphone until eventually I think Ricky turned to you and said, "Can you stop doing that?" Right now, at the time, I cut that into a supercut, put it up on YouTube. Everyone loved it, watching you try and put this microphone together. I
Yep.
also felt very sorry for you because clearly the microphone was broken and you did everything you could to fix
Yep.
it. Um, is that having now listened to you and talking about the different mental health things, is that something that is quite common, that you can't let something small like that go? Because there's another story I remember as well. I think it might have been from that same series where there was a ball stuck in the Adelaide Oval nets when you were arrested from that game, and like eventually Troy Cooley had to come over and get you out of the nets because you'd spent about 25 minutes throwing a ball up trying to knock this other ball out of the nets. And so it feels like for me that you got very fixated on very small things, and that sort of completely took over your personality. Is that something that you've learned more about yourself as you got older?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And thanks for reminding me about those things. It goes back and reminds me that the little finger tap that I do, or little patterns I do on the remote control at home on the TV. And that's when Jess actually said to me, "I think something's going on with you. Like you keep doing this tapping. Like I don't know what it is. Your legs tapping away, but you're playing on the remote control and you're doing something." I said, "Yeah, I'm just doing patterns. I feel like I need to be moving little joints in my body." And I think when that mic, I do vaguely remember that now. And I think it was sort of, I don't know if it was irritating me, but I just felt like I needed to fix it up every time and try and figure out a way to keep it standing up. And I think that was just, yeah, part of that ADHD that was coming out of me. And um, yeah, look, I look back and I don't think anything bad of it. I think it was just part of me at the time, and still is now.
I heard all this obviously about the ADHD on the new show. So the Mitch Johnson podcast starts next week. This is the introduction episode, as it is, so we can get your feed starting and everything else. I feel like listening to you talk that while you enjoyed doing your book, of
Yeah.
course, that was kind of a one-off thing. I feel like you're someone who probably needs to talk about what's going on in your life. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually having this conversation just recently with my wife, and I think a few friends as well, and just saying that I've always let things just bottle up inside, and I feel like I've done that to protect myself, especially in the position that I was in playing for Australia. You're in the public eye. I didn't want people to know me probably to that point, like that personally. Um, and it wasn't that I think it was more, like I said, just protection more than anything. I didn't even think about consequences if I came out and said I'm dealing with ADHD or depression, which I didn't even know fully at the time. There was like inkling of it, like with certain things, like we were talking about before. But yeah, I think now I feel like I have so much information, and doing that book was really nice and cathartic at the time. But I still like left a lot of stuff out because at that time I wasn't talking about my depression or ADHD, which was a big part of my life and big part of my career. So now that I have more understanding, I'm very open. I think this is why I wanted to do the podcast, was to be able to get it out there, talk about it, because there are a lot of people that are in similar situations, and I just want to try and get my story out there, and hopefully that helps other people be able to talk about it or deal it with it in their own way.
Yeah, I was thinking back because I remember the first part of your career. I think the general conception was, and you weren't that open. We didn't know that much about you, other than you bowled 90-mile-an-hour left arm
Yeah,
seam, right? But I think that first part of your career, I think there was this misconception that you weren't very bright, and that like you were just this guy who was a natural athlete, and someone threw the ball at you, and you would come in. And I remember really vividly, and I must have written this note down in my notebook like 150 times watching
yeah,
you play. Why does he continue to tinker with his bowling action as he's walking back to his mark? Which is not something you don't see Ryan Harris do that,
yeah,
right? Like, someone who knows what they're doing. And we thought this guy, he's out of his depth. It was kind of the opposite though, wasn't it? It was like there was too much going on with you at times, and you were almost constantly tinkering to get that sort of perfection. And it wasn't really that there wasn't anything going on. That in your brain
there
there
was
was
a lot. Yeah,
everything was going
I
on.
think you're probably right. Like I wouldn't say I'm the brightest, but definitely when it came
I never said that.
but I think I had so much going on in my mind. I'd changed my action so many times with when I had four
Mm.
stress fractures. So um, I was a very late starter in cricket. So for me, growing up, I was playing tennis and that was my game. Cricket came along, worked through my action a few times. And then when it came to games, I was just overthinking it all and trying to keep thinking about technique all the time. And just, I'm that perfectionist on the inside. I wanted to do everything perfectly. And that was part of it. I remember that so clearly. I'd be like thinking, walking back, going, I've got to get my arm into this position. My front arm's got to be up high. I've got to run in with high knees. So I'm like 100 miles an hour in my head. And that was definitely something that frustrated me a lot. And I didn't know or understand why I was sort of thinking that way. I think also maybe a little part of it was because of, like I said, I had those injuries, and that was just sort of bred into me at an early age and early part of my career. I think I was definitely out of my depth early on. I didn't have well, the belief. I was definitely felt like I was behind the eight ball when it came to being one of the best bowlers in the team. So there was definitely times of that as well. But yeah, the overthinking part is something that I definitely have become better with now. And the second part of my career was something that I worked on a little bit, and just having more belief in myself and backing my skills. My action was going to be my action. I had to accept that and then just go out there and keep a clear head by actually, I had a song in my head, which was the Frozen song, Let It Go, which was a big part of me not overthinking, because I used that to block everything else out. So, and that was the crowds as well. That was all the abuse that you get at times, or the feedback that you get at times that you try to, again, overthink. So all that stuff is stuff that I learned how to deal with, and now they're my challenges in my everyday life as well. So
Yeah, I mean, the feedback thing is really interesting because uh, I think as an Australian cricket writer, so my career basically, I started really, at a similar point that you did as a cricket writer, and so you became one of the obsessions that anyone, especially as an Australian cricket writer, you didn't have a choice; you were there all the time. It felt like you were either the hero or the villain. There was never any middle ground. Like, if you look at Peter Siddle's career, Peter Siddle had a really good career, but there were just times when Peter Siddle was
yeah,
there, and Ben Hilfenhaus, they were just bowling, they were doing
yeah,
well. You were either the guy that was overhyped or the guy that was the
yeah,
problem. And that must have that for someone who's trying to work out who he is as a person, for someone who's maybe not quite feeling as comfortable in his cricket as he should, it's really hard to be told you're the hero one day and then a week later be told you're the reason your team's lost. And it was almost as up and down as your bowling could be,
yeah.
right? It was, if you bowl good, everyone says you're great, and if you bowl bad, oh, why is he in the team?
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I used to look at those guys, like you said, Hilfenhaus and Siddle, and go, I was like amazed at how consistent they were. But I was just a different type of bowler altogether. And I didn't realize that at first. It took me a little while, and had to go through all the ups and downs, like you said. And I think one conversation I had with was Glenn McGrath was about bowling performances and trying to drag them closer together. So not having too many, big spikes and too many low spikes. You sort of try and get them banded together. So my goal when I was playing cricket was to get 4 wickets a test match as an average, and I think that sort of helped me in a lot of ways. But it's still, I think the type of bowler that I was I was the guy that was erratic. I didn't have the same consistency as some of those other guys. But once I realised all those things, that I could bowl fast, I was a left arm, I could swing it, I could go for runs. I could happily accept to go for runs. Once I actually accepted that, that made a big difference, because I was such an attacking player, and such an aggressive bowler. Um, this is how funny it is. We used to have conversations as a bowling group, and it was like, first, we've got to get the ball up there, pitch it up full, get it full as possible. If we get driven, we get driven. And my theory was that doesn't get me rhythm. Like in the back of my head, I was thinking if I bowl short and get aggressive early on, that gets me into the game. I feel like much better. So I didn't ever, I don't think I ever spoke to anyone about that. And I just started doing it. And then I'd find my length that way, because it used to be said that it's quite hard to find your good length when you're bowling short at the start. But I don't know. I felt like it was a lot easier for me because of the style of bowler that I was. I was never, like I said, never that full length bowler. Yeah, I'd try to sometimes early on if it was swinging, and that was another issue actually, swinging the ball. I mean, I got praised for swinging the ball at certain times, but I wasn't a swing bowler either. Just on occasions it would come out and it would swing, so then I'd have to work with it. So, I mean, yeah, I look back and think about all that stuff now, and it is a roller coaster ride, and it's something that I'm quite proud of actually to get through and to be able to finish my career the way I did, to figure out all those things and not give up on it. I think that was a real challenge for me, but it's something that I'm very proud of.
Well, the swinging is really interesting because that 10-11
Swung
Ashes
around
test, you
corners.
did swing the
Yep.
ball. Yeah, it's massively swinging it. And I remember you being asked afterwards, and you were like, "I don't really know what
Yeah.
happened. It swung for me." And I think that we didn't know, as I said, we didn't know that much about you. You weren't one of those. Shane Watson, like love him, I
Yep.
hate him. He's out there. Like everyone kind of knew everything about
Yep.
Watto. Watto was hosting his own press conferences at Shield games, right? Like he was really
Yep.
public, and you weren't like that. So when you hear something like that, and also there are things that happened to you that were slightly unfair. You were called a once in a generation cricketer at a really early stage
Yeah.
in your development. When you tell a story in the podcast, which I thought was really interesting. When you sort of start getting picked for representative cricket, Queensland, all that sort of stuff, you had the long hair. If I remember, did you not have a labret piercing? Do
Yeah,
I
I did.
remember? Do you have a piercing like a? Yeah, yeah. I
Labret,
thought you
tongue
did. I've
piercing,
looked for
that
that photo for
earring. Yeah.
years. Yeah, I've never been able to find it, but I do. I remember seeing you really early on with that, and you talk about in the podcast of not quite feeling like you fit in with the rest of the cricket guys, and they were all, as you said, cricket guys, and you came from another sport
Yeah.
altogether. Um, the once in a generation, there was a lot of things that you kind of had to overcome to get to that late period. It makes sense that you were at your best right at the end, because at the beginning it must have been a bit of a whirlwind at times of you trying to work out who you were as a person, let alone as a
Yeah,
cricketer.
definitely. And I mean, I came from a small country town, I guess, in Townsville, North Queensland, and I grew up quite shy as well. Like I wasn't very talkative, and I think the trusting as well, like not trusting so many people early on, probably had an impact as well. So it took me a while to sort of settle and go through those battles. But I think I look at it now, and I think it was a great learning curve for me, and I don't have any regrets on what happened throughout my career. I think all of it, good and bad, got me to where I am. So I think that probably helped in a lot of ways. I'm a quite open-minded person, even though sometimes I may react quite sharply or may disagree straight away with certain things, which I used to do with some of the fast bowling coaches. But they knew me quite well and knew that I needed that time to then cool off. And I'd often go up and apologise for probably having a go at them at first, and then having a good conversation. So that's just, yeah, like I said, it was just all part of it, and it was a great experience of my life.
Onto the podcast then. I suppose the first thing that you talked about was ADHD. That's kind of the new, well, not the first thing, the most recent
Yeah.
development sort of in your life is learning that you have ADHD. Really weirdly, so I wrote about Benny Howe the England cricketer, and he's talked a lot about his ADHD and how it, I suppose, in some ways helped him become a better cricketer, but completely randomly. In that,
Yep.
he has this, a bit like you, he has this. It comes out in a similar way of that restlessness, and what he find comfortable was having a ball in his
Yep.
hand and inventing new deliveries. And he now says he has 50 deliveries. I'm not sure, Benny, you do have 50, but how many deliveries he has
Yeah.
is up to him and on his sofa. Um, and a friend of mine who just recently got diagnosed with ADHD got in touch with me because of that thing
Yep.
recently, and it was at the same time I was listening to your show. It's obviously a challenge, but I find, looking back at your life, that it was probably more of a challenge that you didn't know that you had
Yeah.
it, right? Rather than the actual. I'm not saying it's every day you have
Yeah.
to deal with it, even so, but it's more of a challenge of just not knowing what to do or who to talk to or how to explain things. Benny Howe tried to. He told me that it was like being in an attic where there were like cobwebs everywhere and too much furniture and too many boxes, and that's what his brain was
Yep.
like. Once he understood that, he was like, "Great, well now I can work out how to get through it." Is that kind of how you felt as you've started to
You're
learn
spot
about it?
on, 100%. I think I just didn't know what was going on. I thought it was just normal what was happening, throughout my life, my career, and I had no idea. So, and I look back now, and I've been given like the signs of what to look for, and it's like, oh, that all makes sense. But I mean, for me, I was more that I'm not that uh, hyperactive, like all day, every day. I get moments of like I'm jittery, and I'm like, but it was the hyper focus was the biggest thing for me, and that's probably why I did so well with cricket. Like ultimately, because I knew what I needed to do. Like especially at the back end or halfway through my career, I was able to be so focused on what I wanted to do, and it helped me big time get through. So yeah, I think spot on with what you're saying there. It's I'm able to use it to my advantage, I guess now because I do know. I'm not sort of confusing it with is there something wrong with me? At least I know what is going on, and it's not until I really. I mean, I got on the Dex amphetamines to sort of help with it after I finished, and I noticed a few things that no, I was able to focus normally on getting things done and not. So the problem I sort of had without medication was I would start some things and then not finish it. When it came to cricket, though, like I did everything, but it was when it was outside of cricket, I couldn't complete tasks. I'd sit in meetings where, even actually cricket meetings where I'd zone out like within 2 minutes. I actually I've told a lot of people this, like friends and family, that I'd be in a conversation with my wife and I would have zoned out pretty early on, but I pick up on like keywords and then I can repeat like what she said pretty closely. But she didn't know that I was zoning out until I told her. And she goes, it all makes sense now because sometimes I wouldn't do exactly what she asked. So I hope that all makes sense. It's sort of doing my head in right now, but yeah, no, it was. It's definitely good to know what was going on, and I can see that now looking back.
The other main theme that came through it is, I wouldn't want to say adrenaline junkie. In fact, I'm pretty sure you say to Bharat, you're not an adrenaline junkie. But I think there's been a big move in the last couple of years of your life to kind of replace what cricket did for
Yep.
you, emotionally, maybe as much as anything. So, you've got an MMA fight coming up shortly, and you've been on the racetrack a few times as
Yep.
well. There's clearly something within you that is driving you to be, I mean, those are not things that a man of your age usually
Yeah.
starts to get
Yeah.
into, right? And so clearly, there's you. I don't want to say that you've had problems with adjusting
Yeah.
to not being a professional athlete, but I kind of more mean you still need that little bit of edge that competitive stuff gives
Yeah,
you.
I think so. I'm not the full adrenaline junkie, but I sort of feel like, and it's funny with the racing thing. I spoke to Jess about this recently as well, and I said it's more of it feels like a control thing for me when so we are talking about um, going to the show and going on rides. I never liked going on rides because I never had control of them. So going on like the Whizzer or anything like I never went on them because I felt like it was out of control. And then I said, well, when it comes to the car racing, I feel like I'm in control because I'm steering and I've got the foot on the pedal and the brake. And even though it's like there's that danger to it, I'm not thinking the danger. I'm just thinking I've got the control here, and I feel like safer in that way. So it's quite interesting that. And I guess it's not, well, I do a bit of MMA, but the charity boxing match, I guess in a way I've got the control again. I've got the gloves on. I can move around. It's me controlling that part, I guess. So yeah, I guess that's where it makes sense for me.
Yeah, and obviously you've got some competitiveness in you, as anyone who was on Twitter during the Irfan and Yusuf Pathan moment from the Legends League will know more about. Look, mate, it's a huge honor to have you come to the podcast network. It's massive for us. You and Barra, I've heard, I think about 3 or 4 episodes. I feel like, and I think I had read your book. I'm pretty sure I've read your book. And I felt like I know a lot about you as well. But I feel like you're being more open and honest, and you just needed a place to regularly talk about. Obviously, it's going to be about a bunch of different
Yeah.
things. A lot of it is about you, becoming a non-professional athlete. There's also stuff about your career that we'll be talking about, and I'm sure that when something annoys you in the cricket news, Barrett won't be able to hold you back from mentioning that as well. In fact, let's just throw Pat Cummins, one-day captain. It doesn't make any sense to me because I don't think he's going to play much one-day cricket. But I suppose there's a World Cup
Oh,
around
he's
the
just said
corner.
it as well.
Thoughts, Mitch?
He said it in the press conference that he'll probably be rested from games and because of the amount of cricket. So it seems like it's already been set up for the next person in line, which has all been Davey Warner. They've been talking a lot about him, but it's a hard one because I don't know if they had a lot of choice. To be honest, there's no one really cementing that spot. Maybe Carey as a wicketkeeper batsman. Possibly. I've always liked Head, but just needs that consistency. I think he does a great job with his state, but just needs that consistency at the top level. So there are maybe a couple of people around, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's the right thing. When they make these decisions, I try to not get too emotional about it, and I try and think it through a little bit. And we'll have to wait and see. But he's already come out and said that he's not probably going to play all the games. So it's a strange one, but I think maybe they just didn't have too many options.
I think that's right. Barrett told me recently, and I'd forgotten this, that Travis Head was made Test vice captain at one stage. Then he was dropped from
I
the
think
Test
Mitch Marsh
team,
was as
but
well.
they never said if he.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure they said any of them were no longer vice
I don't know.
captains. So I like to think that there are just random vice captains around at all times, which kind of tells you that there's a bit of a problem with leadership within the main, let's say, 8 or 9 players, which is why Pat Cummins ends up with all the jobs. Your show is called The Mitch Johnson Show. It's going to be coming out on Mondays. Hopefully, the first episode will be this Monday. And it will be this Monday because whenever we put this out, it'll be the following Monday. So I'm not going to give the exact date so that we don't get that wrong. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. I think I told you when I was listening into the first recording and I forgot I wasn't listening to a normal podcast and I went into a shop and I was trying to press pause. And then I realized that we were actually live recording. So I think it's a very good sign that you two were talking about some great things, so much so that I got lost in the moment. So thanks for coming on the network, mate. And we can't wait to hear more great things
It's great
from
to
you.
be a part of the team. I'm looking forward to it. And like you said, there's plenty of open and honest conversations that go on. It's all about different types of things. There'll be some current stuff. There'll be some stuff about my past, my career. We'll look at all different types of bowlers, I think, in the near future as well. So there's so much going on, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, like I said, great to be a part of the team.
No worries, and we'll just now we'll just play a couple of minutes of the first part of what? Not even. I'll start that again. And now we'll just play a couple of minutes of the first episode so that you can get your whistle wetted, and then keep coming back once a week. And Mitch and Burra will be talking about the life of Mitchell Johnson.
Of course, I saw you play your cricket. I covered your cricket as well over the years. But the moment when I really decided that I would love to do a podcast with you, it was back in 2019. We were in London and you're doing a live show with our good friends Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon. Uh, And I just sat there listening to you. And honestly, I told myself, you know what, someday I would love to, I've actually not, I would love to, I will, have a podcast. I will do a podcast with this man. And if you think about it, it's a classic modern day romantic story, right? It's happened. It's taken a while, but it's happened.
Yeah, I remember doing that, and I just remember it was probably at that point after my career where I really wanted to open up. I think through my career I was quite open most of the time. I went through my ups and downs with the media, but after sort of, I think it was coming back into the game, that 2013-14 series definitely helped my relationship with the media. It was probably just before that I sort of made a bit more of an effort to make those relationships with certain journalists, and then be able to go into those press conferences, being open and honest as much as you could. Being in a team environment, you didn't want to obviously give too much away, but you wanted to be as open and honest. So that's how I always tried to be, because I felt like that was always the best way to go about it. And I think people can see through a bit of the bullshit, but um, yeah, when I did that over in England, it was another sort of step up for me because I was outside of the game, starting to realize that, I don't have to talk like a player. I can be, more open again, talk a little bit more about things that I liked, talk a bit about my career as well. I think that's one thing we've spoken about off air, on phone calls together, being able to talk about my career and my path, which is something you don't get to do when you're in your career. And even when you finish, you don't tend to, if you're doing commentary for the companies, whether it's TV or radio, you're not talking about your career. You're talking about those guys that are out there in the middle. And so I think it's a great opportunity to, well, that was a great opportunity in England to be able to start being really open. And I actually did start to think about doing podcasts around that time, like vaguely, like from my memories, going back to then. And it's sort of built up over time. And it's, like I said, like you've sort of reached out to me, and you've been able to be a good friend, and you always come up and say good day, and made me feel comfortable. So the partnership again is, I think there's a lot to this, and I'm really looking forward to doing some good stuff with you.